order, September 13th, 2023 at 5:15. Let's go ahead. If I could ask everyone to please silence your cell phones, put them on vibrate so we don't get disrupted during the meeting. That reminds me I've got to do the same thing. Thank you for that. So please silence your cell phones. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
It goes off, you're going to point to me.
Commissioner Eaton, I'm sorry. Commissioner Fournier.
Here.
Commissioner Moss.
Here.
Commissioner Perkins.
Here.
Commissioner Sigerson Eaton.
Here.
Vice Mayor McGee.
Here.
Mayor Harton.
Here, thank you. If I could ask everyone to please rise for the invocation followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Father, give us wisdom to consider this budget tonight for the city of Pompano Beach, the residents thereof. Let us do our best for those we represent with your guidance. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right. Let's see, Mr. Harrison, any changes to our agenda this evening?
No, sir.
Very good. Can I get a motion approving the agenda as printed?
So moved. Second.
Moved in second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you. That moves us up to our public hearing portion, presentation, staff presentation, tentative adoption of proposed millage rates and proposed budgets of the City of Pompano Beach and the Emergency Medical Services District for fiscal year 2023-2024. I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Harrison, so you can turn it over to Ms. Diamante. Very good. Good job. Ms. Diamante, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor, Vice Mayor, City Commissioners. Arieta Diamante, Budget Director. This is the first budget public hearing to adopt the preliminary millage rates and budgets for the city and the EMS later on. And then we do have the final approval of the fire assessment fees and then a few housekeeping, one housekeeping item related to our HR reconciliation for the new positions and reclassifications. Before I start, as always, I want to thank my team for all the hard work that they have done through this year. We're about in September now, so it's almost the end of our season, budget season. Our city manager's office for their guidance, city manager, and all other stakeholders that have played a very important role in this process. So I'm very thankful for this year and for the work that we have accomplished. And with that said, I'm going to start with the presentation. It's going to be a very short presentation. We're not going to go in all the details. We went through the July budget workshop, but the purpose of this presentation is to recap the fiscal year 24 proposed budget for all funds as presented in the July workshop with the emphasis on the general fund budget. The outline is as follows. We would present the annual budget process timeline, and then it's going to be a summary of the revisions that were implemented after the July workshop. We're going to look at the citywide expense budget, revenue budget, and then we're going to head to the general fund with the expenses known at Avalorm. We're going to stop at fire assessment fees recommendation. Again, this is the final hearing for the fire assessment fees. Fire assessment fees. We're going to look at the tax roll, property valuation again, and then operating millage rates. And then finally, the next steps in the budget process. So the city is required by Florida State Chapter 200.065 to hold 2 public budget hearings to adopt the millage rates and the budgets for a city. And because we do have the EMS district, we also are required to hold 2 hearings for the EMS special district as well. Now, the school board and Broward County that do have the right away to choose the hearing dates. That's why these dates looks like a little odd and outside of the cycle, but because they do have the right away to choose, then we are limited on the days that we choose for these 2 public budget hearings. Where the city is legally required to adopt its millage rates and its budget by October 1st, and failure to adopt the city's budget will result in suspended distribution of major state revenue sources and fire assessment fee collection. Now, the deadline to submit the final fire assessment resolution is September 15th. The annual budget process timeline, the city's budget process is a year-round cycle, as it is illustrated by this chart. We do start in January, February every year. It's a little different. However, the cycle goes on every year. It's almost never ending. I want to put an emphasis also on our budget, operating budget book, which has received the Distinguished Budget Award from the Government Finance Officers Association. That means that the budget book is prepared of the very highest quality that reflects both guidelines established by the National Advisory Council on state and local budgeting, and also applies to the GFOA best practices on budgeting. This is a summary of the major revisions implemented after the July budget workshop. So during the July budget workshop, the City Commission recommended to set the millage rate, the operating millage rate, at 5.2705. And this is a decrease by 1% from the initial proposal of 5.3232. This decrease resulted in a net reduction in property taxes in the general fund by $956,000. Due to this decrease, we have also adjusted the tax increment financing by $93,000. We have increased the Pompano Beach Historical Society contribution as directed by the City Commission by $20,000. Increased Park and Recreation Baseball Program by $37,000. Now, during the July budget workshop, we did mention that there is another item that we were looking at based on the just signed bill regarding the Florida Retirement System contribution for police services. So that impact was $840,000 in the general fund. We did increase golf revenue projections, anticipated the increase in golf fees by $500,000 from the initially recommended fees. This is subject to City Commission approval. Increased cemetery revenue projections by $85,000, and this is based on the most updated ordinance that the City Commission has adopted, number 2023-61. We did increase revenue projections for half sales tax and fire assessment fee, just a minor adjustment there. Increased general fund balance to cover one-time capital improvement projects by $840,000. Postpone a year the design and construction for Hillsborough Inlet improvements and Northeast 14th Causeway Bridge enhancement. That was the City's Commission direction during the budget workshop. $250,000 was projected expenditures for those two projects in total. And finally, the Sand and Spurs budget is included in the proposed budget for fiscal year 2024. There are no changes there. Now, the proposed citywide expense budget by major fund, we have a total budget of $425,677,578. This represents $64.9 million, or 18% increase when it's compared to fiscal year 23 adopted budget of $360.8 million. Our general fund makes up for 50% of this total. General capital 4%, debt service operating funds 2%, special revenue funds 14%, enterprise funds 22%, and internal service funds 8%. Proposed citywide revenue budget by major category. I'm not going to go to details for all of this, but I can emphasize a few of the revenue streams. Licenses and permits, for example, increased by $6.9 million, and this is mostly due to the fire assessment fee to cover 88% of the eligible fire operations, electric and franchise tax, and building permit revenues. Property taxes increased by $10.5 million. This increase is only due to the property valuation for fiscal year 2024, and this includes all EMS, general fund, and debt service funds. And then charges for services. Charges for services increased by 6.7 million, mostly due to the combination of a recommended increase in transport fees, EMS transport fees, water, wastewater, and stormwater fees schedule, solid waste service charges, and some other revenues that are related to golf, as I previously mentioned. Moving on with the proposed general fund expense budget, which is $210,873,000. 54% of that budget, it is contributed or it serves for public safety services. General government services, 15%. Public works, facilities, engineering, 18%. Parks and recreation, cultural affairs, tourism, and marketing, 13%. The increase in the general fund of $31.1 million, or 18%, it is an 18% increase when it's compared to last year's adopted budget. So looking at the major variances, again, there is a lot of description that are provided in the backup, detailed description of each major category. We do see $12 million increase in personnel services, mostly related to salaries and benefits, $5.8 million in operating expenses, a minor decrease in capital. This is pay-as-you-go capital items for the general fund, increased transfers, especially for the general capital fund and EMS fund, and other miscellaneous operating expenditures in the general fund. Looking at general fund non-ad valorem revenues, we have approximately $115.3 million in non-ad valorem revenues. That is $21.5 million increase when it's compared to the last fiscal year's budget, non-ad valorem budget. Moving on with the fire assessment fees, the City Commission adopted during the last Commission meeting in July, which was July 15th, the preliminary amended and restated fire assessment resolution. There are no changes since that adoption. This is the final adoption of fire assessment fees. Fire assessment, the city again hired a consultant to update the fire assessment study for the allocation of the fees based on the fire services provided. And there are adjustments to all fees for residential, $81, and then for all other non-residential fees per square feet. The city is anticipated to collect approximately $28.8 million in revenues. That is net after discounts and after discounts. So how we compare with the other municipalities in Broward County, the fire residential fee of $331, it is ranked the 19th lowest when we compare to other municipalities in Broward County. Now we know the total non-ad valorem revenues and the total expenditures. We need to calculate the ad valorem revenues to balance the general fund. Mr. Kiar was here yesterday, so he did better than I would do here with all his 5 coffees and 3 Red Bulls, but the city did receive the first July 1st valuation, and that valuation for the city is 11.11% increase when it's compared to the July 1st valuation of last year. It's important to note that the July 1st valuation is the valuation we use for budgeting purposes. So overall, for fiscal year 2024, we have a proposed budget, expenditure budget by $210 million. And we have $115 million in non-ad valorem revenues. We need to assess $95.6 million in ad valorem revenues to balance the general fund. Divided that by net mill of $18 million provides us with a recommended millage rate of 5.2705. Again, this millage rate is the millage rate that the City Commission recommended during the July budget workshop. It is same millage rate that it was adopted last year. This table illustrates all millage rates that the city adopts. We do have the operating millage rate, again, set as 5.2705, so there are no changes there. There are no changes for the EMS millage rate as well, which is capped at 0.5. And then we have a slight decrease in the GO bond debt service millage rates, and this is due to the increase in the property valuation. So overall, there is an aggregate millage rate decrease of about 1%. Way we compare with other municipalities in Broward County, we rank the 16th lowest, so out right there in the middle compared to other municipalities. And then finally, the next steps in the budget process. This is the first public budget hearing. Again, we adopt the preliminary millage rates and budgets for the city and the EMS special district, and final adoption of fire assessment fees. And then September 20th at 5:15, next Wednesday, is scheduled for the final public hearing, where the adoption of the final millage rates and budgets for the city is scheduled, and also the adoption of the 5-year capital improvement plan for fiscal year 24-28, and that concludes my presentation.
Very good. Thank you for that. Are there any questions from the commission for Ms. Diamante at this point in time? Vice Mayor? Oh, sure. Take your time. Yeah, I mean, there's plenty of time, because we haven't even gotten to the, that's just, okay. We'll wait until the considerations. Okay, very good. Commissioner Moss?
How did you cover the $400,000 charge to the Sand and Spurs? Where did that money come from?
So that budget did, as mentioned, the budget did not get reduced in the same way as we recommended during the July budget workshop. We did adjust our revenues in the general fund.
Okay, well, we'll talk about this later, okay? I mean, I don't quite understand that, but I won't take up any time.
Okay.
Very good. Further commission's questions at this time? Commissioner Perkins?
Yes, on page 8, the operating expenses, it says the increase for BSO is how much is the increase on page 8?
$840,000. This is due to the latest bill that it was signed and got into effect on July 1st, I believe, for the Florida retirement system.
Okay, again, how much is the increase again? I didn't understand you.
$840,000 was the difference from the proposed total allocation from the July till now.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Any further questions at this time? Vice Mayor?
Do we have, I know we have the aggregate millage here as well, but do we have the millage that would incorporate the fire assessment as well?
We don't have a millage rate that incorporates fire. The fire assessment fee serves to assess revenues that will cover 88% of the eligible fire operations.
And what is the total amount that we're
Oh, yeah, so the total amount on page, on page 10 of the presentation, the fire assessment fees are estimated to assess approximately 28.8 in net revenues in the general fund after all the discounts.
Okay.
From all fees combined.
So it's going up a little under $4 million.
Yeah. And in terms of mill, what is $4 million?
So $18 million is 1 mil.
Okay. You can come back to me when we do math.
Okay, she's doing some math now, okay.
So 1% basically of the millage rate, it's $900,000, about $1 million. So we're looking at 4% basically.
4% increase in the millage rate.
Yes.
So that, hold on. I'm going to do different math.
Not in mils, in percentage. in percentage.
But just, but just based upon the updated study,
Yes.
yeah, just to be clear, so based upon the updated study,
So we are required, based on the updated study, we are required to adjust our fees. However, and that is the $34 for the residential fee. Now, above and beyond that, the staff has provided the recommendation to increase the rate to $81 per residential fee. Therefore, all the other fees are adjusted. That proposal, it is going to assess $28.8 million, and that will cover 88% of the eligible fire services.
so if we wanted
If,
to, wait,
yeah, I'm sorry.
that's okay. If we wanted to keep the residential rate the same as what it currently is, it would actually be more than the $4 million, because we would have to technically be reducing the other rates. In other words, if we wanted to keep the residential rate the same as it is now, we'd have to really reduce the other rates way down, which we're going to have more of an impact than just $4 million.
So if we are required, based on the study, to adjust the rates regardless. That adjustment is additional $34 from the $250.
But my point, though, is we are required by the study to adjust the proportion that we charge. Now, to get the same amount of revenue
Exactly.
we currently get, we're required to raise it to $34
Yes.
residential rate. But if we wanted to keep the residential rate the same as it is now, we could do that if we wanted to pour more money in, but it would cost us more than just the $4 million. Well,
Yes.
don't worry about it. Okay. First I've got Commissioner Fournier, then I'll get back to Vice Mayor. Okay.
I think I agree with your assessment there, Mayor.
no worries.
But I think it's hard to convert the fire assessment into a millage rate, because mills multiplies by a taxable value, and the fire assessment is per house, or so.
It's about the same. So if you were to levy $1 million, you will have to increase the millage rate by 1%. So we're saying we want $3.8 million additional. That means 4% about.
Okay, understand what you're trying to
Millage
do.
rate.
I see, yeah. It's,
Vice Mayor?
My thought process, and this is what I thought when I voted yes during the Sand and Spurs meeting, is that we were going to try and absorb the difference in the fire assessment fee by lowering the operating budget by enough to absorb the cost for this year. That was really why I voted yes, so it's because we were going to get to that. So, and it's especially since, I don't know other commissioners who may have heard from their residents since then. I've had now multiple residents through the month of August ask me to try and price their condos, because between taxes going up, inflation going up, insurance going up, cost of concrete going up, to everything, they don't know if they can stay living in this city. And I know we're seeing this across the board, so I'm just trying to do just what's in our power. Obviously, we don't have a power to deal with inflation or change the insurance market or anything else. So I'm just trying to see where in our power we are able to at least try and hit the same as last time, especially when we're showing that because of raised valuations, we're getting millions more in, just trying to absorb the increased fire assessment fee, at least, especially since we're hopefully going to reassess the fire assessment in 2 years because of the COVID issue, at least try and not pass that on in taxes for this year and possibly next year. That's where my questions are, trying to figure the math out too, like how much, if we were to absorb the difference in the fire assessment, the $81 per household, what are we looking at there? Like how much money is that?
But we couldn't just absorb the $81 for the residential. We'd have to absorb all, the increase in the commercial also.
Well, then for it all then, how much would that be to absorb what, and then that way we can look at things that are coming down the pipeline, similar to what I said with the 14th Street Causeway Bridge. There's some things that maybe just don't need to be in this year's budget while everything seems to be kind of culminating to an all-time high.
Well, but we've got a $4 million increase, basically, from last year to this year as far as the fire assessment.
Okay.
So if we wanted to convert the $4 million from an assessment to property to a millage rate, we can do that. But,
No, you cannot.
well,
Could we
We cannot increase the millage rate at this point, so
could we knock 4 million off the budget
to reduce the budget by $4 million?
to absorb this overage?
What are we reducing? Like, is there any proposal to which services you want to cut?
No, I'm asking, is it even something we could consider?
it gets,
Totally out there.
it gets, yeah, we could.
Or
Of
like
course we
by
could.
half or
We could, but at this point in time, we're kind of far down the road as far as that goes. As far as trying to figure out where we're going to cut, that's a big nut to crack. And as far as saying, well, okay, what about reserves? I'm not sure if taking another $4 million out of reserves, that might put us, out of whack with the auditors and things like that. So.
Well, I'm not, and and I know I'm gonna bring it up every single time we budget, because also after the Sand and Spurs meeting, I had residents say, why are we giving away money and raising the millage? Like, if we have to raise the millage on our residents, who are we to give money as far as the grants? And when you put together the third-party expenditures plus in kind for fire and rescue, you're close to $1 million there. So that's a start. Like, there just seems to be places where we could look, and like I said, also possibly just pushing off things that, yeah, we want, but maybe just this year, next year is not the time to do it.
Sure, no, I hear you.
Like, not necessarily canceling things, just, timeline.
Yeah.
Budgeting, figuring timelines.
And some things have been pushed back in the CIP. I mean, that was, Ms. Diamante highlighted those. So, yeah, no, that's all things that we have looked at and utilized.
And so these are the things that, I don't know if it's now to do it or another, but I'd like to make a motion that we continue to look at how we can absorb this increase so our residents don't have to this year.
Okay, so there's a motion to continue to look to,
The motion would be to at least by half, absorb the $4 million increase caused by the fire assessment increase for this year. Like I said, I would start with that one. If you're looking where to start, that's where I would start. I don't know if we'll have the support of the board on this. Like, I'm looking for ideas too. I'm not, the guru of figuring out where to cut things at all. Ms. Diamante probably is. But it's just, yeah, what's the purpose of making our city amazing if the people who paid in to make it amazing can't live here?
sure, okay, so you're making a motion to, in essence, cut the budget by $2 million.
Yeah, we'll go with 2.
Okay, that's fine,
Like 4,
okay.
but we go with 2.
Okay, so we've got a motion on the floor to cut the budget by $2 million. Is there a second? Commissioner Fournier?
Can I ask a couple clarifying questions?
Get a second.
You can ask questions after seconding.
Sure, yeah.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second on the floor to cut the budget by $2 million. Okay, Commissioner Fournier?
So if we recall the budget workshop, I was really concerned about the fire assessment fee and its impact on residents at that time. I sat down subsequently with Chief Mercado and Ms. Diamante to talk about it, and it became clear that there was very little we could do with this, given the study that we had done. But I completely agree that affordability is top of mind for everyone in our city right now, between insurance, taxes, the cost of living due to inflation. It is hard to live here right now for longtime residents who have owned homesteaded properties for years. It is still difficult to make everything work. So I think it's always the most important thing we do is spend people's money, and we should do that with the utmost respect for people, and that it is their, every dollar is theirs. If we are spending it, we should have a very good reason to be doing that. So I always think it is good to go back and sharpen our pencils to see what else we can do. Now, it does seem rather late in the game for this. So from a process perspective, I don't know how this works. Maybe Mr. Harrison can clarify that, but is that feasible at this point?
I can answer that. If the staff is directed to do it, they will do it.
Okay.
And I have to say, like, I know,
Are you-
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I know it seems a
Okay.
little
Vice
late
Mayor.
in the game and it's almost running, but for the past 4 years, every single budget meeting I've had with staff, I've been trying to lower the millage. That's been kind of what one of my points has been, is that, especially now as we have things coming online, and perhaps this is where we do take a really hard look at our budget, not just this year, but the few years out. Because yes, we're going to have some great projects coming online that are going to fund a lot and cover a lot. But, when I look at our ranking, we're dead middle. When I started, we were in the bottom third. And and I know the fire assessment we can't do much with, but yeah, we're number 13 out of 31 for highest. And it just seems to me, with all the investments we've been putting into the city, with what we've done, and if it's too late for this one, then maybe this is just the real direction for the next year's budget to trim down too. Or I would like to see them both trim down, but at least really start focusing on doing that, making sure that our returns don't just turn into expenditures, that our returns that we're pulling in allow us to start decreasing for longevity, because eventually we're not going to have, all these buildings coming online. And if I worry that if we're still high up expenditure-wise at that point, when we're not suddenly getting, 19, 20, whatever $1 million more from revenue increases, or if there's I'm just not going to say the other option that happened in 2008 because I don't want to jinx anything. But just that we need to make sure we don't spend as much as we can because it's there, just keeping eyes on the future of when it slows down, because it will.
Very good. Commissioner Fournier?
I agree with that. The promise of growth is to offset future expenses and to keep the tax rate low. So from a high-level strategy, that is one of the reasons we point to for growth, to increase the tax base. So, and we have seen a lot. It's not, compared to other cities, we didn't have quite as much in new development as I expected, but it was explained to me that there can be big timing differences when things come online. So I don't know, what we anticipate next year, or if there's a way to know that. But maybe there are some big projects that will be CO'd and coming on next year. So this is a year to try to tighten our belts a little.
Yeah,
Okay, Vice Mayor?
and that's and that is exactly what I'm thinking. Some of the project, if we can tighten our belts on this year, pushing some projects back. No, because there's a handful, I know just in my district, big projects coming online that will offset costs. That if we can look at this year as a diet, to start a diet, and then we can look at things again next year.
Very good. Commissioner Moss?
Well, I think this is kind of late in the game to be doing this, but aren't we also in a position where we are having to increase expenses because of not just the anticipated growth, but the growth that is on the planning stages, that when it comes to fruition, we will be receiving a lot more tax funds for. For example, the Isle Casino. There is money that needs to be spent to prepare for what's being done there, but once that's up and running, that's going to be an enormous boost to our tax base. And there are many other projects that are going on right now that next year, the year after, will make it possible for us to lower the millage rate and other fees. Also, I have to wonder, yes, obviously it's an expensive place to live, South Florida, but are we going to be able to cut the budget enough to make much of a difference in the way people live in this city or can afford to live in the city? And also, sorry to beat a dead horse, but how serious can we be about this if you want to spend $400,000 to house 25 private horses on rented land. So, I mean, we want to start cutting. That's probably the first thing that should have been cut, but we backed down on that. So let's get serious about it, really. I think this is, you know, it's too late to begin this process right now. But if you want in next year, that's something to look at. But I don't know that we can cut enough to make an appreciable difference in the lives of our citizens without doing more damage to our fire response, our EMS, and other essential services. So I think we just have to, we should have made this decision before, not tonight. Thanks.
I have to agree with Commissioner Moss. It's, you know, staff is tasked with coming up with a budget where they are directed by this commission to look at maintaining and enhancing services to our residents, and that's what they've done. And I'm going to do that throughout the year, not just at budget time, but throughout the year. And that is part of what we have done in this city with our GO bond projects. You know, we can't have a senior center without people. We can't have a Bury Center without people. We can't have a youth sports complex without people. It costs money. All those projects that yeah, we all were very happy about and the residents voted to move forward with, it costs the money to build them, but it costs the money to maintain and staff it. And so, you know, yeah, staff will do what we tell them to do, but we have told them throughout the years to make sure you don't cut services. We don't want to diminish the services that the residents have come to expect in the city of Pompano Beach. And I've been through, I was sitting here in 2007, 2008, and I've been through times where, yes, we did have to cut, and we did have to make those difficult decisions, and yeah, it hurt. And hopefully we won't get back to those times anytime soon, but so far staff has done the bidding of this commission to enhance our city and enhance the services that the residents get delivered. So yes, at this point, I completely agree that every tax dollar is precious because it's not my dollar. It's somebody else's dollar. Of course, we all pay taxes also, but it's the people's dollars, and they should keep every dollar that they possibly can that we don't need to operate this government and deliver services to the residents. And I firmly believe that. And the people put their trust in us as their representatives to make the decisions for them on these types of matters with their input, of course. But at this point in time, to just say, well, let's cut $2 million, it's like, well, okay, Parks and Rec, you're done. I don't mean to pick on Parks and Rec, but I mean, we've had these kind of discussions before, at the last minute like this before, and then it's where, well, you know, and it's usually because the comments by individual commissioners have not been embraced by the commission previously throughout the process. Now, it's not that we as a commission don't agree with the concept that every dollar should stay with the residents. It's not that we as a commission don't agree with the concept that yes, we should look to cut wherever we possibly can, but it's because this commission has not embraced a particular number by other commissioners. And that's usually how we get to this point in time and have this kind of discussion at this point in time, which we have been here before with prior commissioners. And that's not to diminish your voice or your motion at all, but to say that, well, yeah, it's a great idea, but it wasn't reality for this year. And at some point in time, hopefully it will be, and every year we look to cut wherever possible, but when we go through a building process in this city, it's like, well, wow, we kind of knew what we were asking for. I mean, when you build these things, it's going to cost us money, and that's where we're at. So anyway, that's all I've got to say, so I'll turn it back over to Vice Mayor.
I just want to say again, this is my fourth budget session, right?
It's been a few.
Fourth or fifth? Fifth budget session then. And yes, I've brought it up every single budget session. A fund that in my opinion we should not be doing, and is quite literally about $1 million between in-kind and what we give out, which is to third-party people that's not the city, that we could cut. And last budget session, I had 5-1 support in the workshop to remove the 300,000 of that. So I can augment my motion, or I'll drop my first motion of the 2 million, and would like to reintroduce a moratorium on third-party spending for as long as it takes to figure out the EMS assessment, because we think we can reassess in 2 years, and then when we can see what our city financial looks like then, we can then make a decision, the commission at the time can make a decision as to whether or not they're going to start giving back to third-party vendors.
So your motion is to cease all donations to anyone, any entities that we fund outside of core city services. So you're talking all nonprofits, or I mean,
Yes.
yes. So cease funding all nonprofits through the city budget process. I assume you're not talking about the OHUI department because that's funded separately.
No.
Okay.
The main,
You're talking the historical society. You're talking the list of folks that we go through and see every year.
well, and in addition, the 300,000 pot that we have a third party
No, that's okay.
handle.
I hear you. I hear you.
Question.
So that's your motion.
Yes.
Okay, let's see if there's a second.
Just a question. Does that motion include $400,000 for the Sand and Spurs?
To be fair, when I voted yes for Sand and Spurs, I thought this was already covered. The question I asked the city manager before I voted on Sand and Spurs was, would they be able to cut enough from the budget to keep it, to absorb the up of that as the only reason to continue forward with Sand and Spurs? And I was also encouraged by the people who spoke up who want to try and do something with it to hopefully cash flow it.
I mean, we've heard that song dance.
Just to keep us on track here, though, you're talking about the nonprofits. Sand and Spurs is a city park that has funding there. So that would not be included in what you're talking about. So
No, I'm talking about the third parties, mostly nonprofits,
Right.
that do other events and things that are not the city specifically.
Sure.
Who could raise funds through ticket prices, through state grants, possibly
Gotcha.
national grants,
Let's
anywhere
see
else.
if we have a second. Is there a second? Motion dies for lack of second. You still have the floor.
Well, and then just as the floor, and just for all of you to consider for future and everything else, I don't know how we can be serious about trying to keep the budget low or say we're trying to be responsible with every single dollar of taxpayer dollars when we're giving them away. Thank you.
Very good. All right, thank you. Very good. Ladies and gentlemen, please. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but no, thank you very much. Commissioner Fournier?
On page 4, there's a summary of changes after the budget workshop. I thought at the budget workshop, we covered this topic and we voted to do a stage decrease in the contributions. Does anyone else remember talking about this at the budget workshop?
We talked about it, but didn't vote it.
There was discussion, but it wasn't.
I thought we ended up, okay. So I do think that Sand and Spurs did get covered somewhere because the millage rate, we added Sand and Spurs back at the July meeting, and the millage rate is still the 5.2705 that we suggested. So that came out of somewhere. The 400,000 was found, I assume.
Yeah, we adjusted the revenues, yes.
Okay.
So we adjusted golf revenues, as I mentioned before. There was some decrease in some other expenditures as a result of the decrease in the millage rate from the initial proposal. And then we increased the there was a half-cent sales tax increase a little bit, and the fire assessment, just a small adjustment there.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Commissioner Segerson-Eden?
So I think I should clarify things about Sand and Spurs. The city has to pay for the deed restriction on the property because it's not being used as an aviation use. So if it's anything other than aviation, the city would still have to pay a fee. And that fee is paid out of the airport operating fund, Air Park Enterprise Fund. And they get rents So I think the lease agreement this year is at $290,000. The way it came up to the $400,000 mark was through maintenance. Now, and I think we're going to get all this clarified in the future, if I'm correct. It is a park by ordinance. No, it's in our charter. Okay, well, when are we going to get this clarified? Because I understand that it was under Parks and Recreation. Okay, well, that comes as a surprise because that's what I was understanding from what I had heard.
It's never been a park. The area that is assigned for the Sand and Spurs operation is paid for out of the general fund into the Airport Enterprise Fund.
Okay,
That fee is charged into it. The reason it was assigned in Public Works way back when was because all the work and the related workers to carry out that work were Public Works employees, type employees.
sure, like they are with
And-
all the other parks. Public Works takes care of all of our parks.
Yes, ma'am, through grounds maintenance.
Correct, yeah.
Right.
Okay, so that's all I was really pointing out, is that it was, maintenance was added in as an extra expense for Sand and Spurs. And so I think this originally began with the fire assessment fee, which I agree has gone up a crazy amount, a very big jump. But I recognize that we are constrained by certain rules and regs and statutes, and that the amount has to be proportional. And I think, if I was understanding you correctly earlier, Mayor, you were saying that it all has to be relative, the percentages all have to be relative. There's a ratio with commercial, residential, industrial, et cetera, so they all have to follow suit. And you were making the point that if we keep it where it is, then those assessment values stay also lower. So it's more than just the residential, all of it will decrease. And that's difficult, that's problematic. When I first ran and got elected, my husband has worked with the firefighters union, and I've gotten to know over the years how hard our firefighters work, how many calls that they have per year. And if you compare their budget to, say, someone like Coral Springs, they're doing 2-3 times the calls a year. So they're actually doing what they do best and doing a good job at it. And so, I mean, I get it. It's difficult. It's such an extreme jump. We did a study, and we hadn't done one since 2013. Maybe we should have been doing some of those studies all along, but we didn't. So this is where we are. And now that we're doing so much beautification with our GOBON, with our parks and our streetscapes, and there's more maintenance to do, the cost of everything is sky high. Inflation affects all of us. And it's unfortunate. It's just it's a not a good economic time. We know that. We all kind of know that.
I want to clear up one thing.
Mr. Harrison?
There was no different adjustment to the Sand and Spurs operation. After your budget workshop, which I couldn't attend because I was
You were on
at
the
my
phone.
place with COVID, you all took it out completely.
Not I. I didn't vote for it. I didn't vote.
Well,
I voted against
anyway-
taking it out.
Anyway, at your July workshop, the majority of the commission at that workshop took it out. And then you had a meeting subsequent to that, and it was voted unanimously to put back in.
Yes. Not
Oh,
unanimously,
I'm
but by
sorry, sir.
majority.
You're right,
By majority.
by majority.
That's
Again, by majority. But at any rate, the numbers are still the same as I recommended originally.
Right.
So that budget is still the same as it was in the original budget proposal.
I'm not disagreeing with you.
Okay. I thought there was some thought that there was money added to whatever the numbers were
No,
for whatever. But anyway, I just want to make it clear.
Okay, so on the presentation, sure, go ahead, Commissioner Moss.
First of all, for those who are listening, I'm not against horses. I'm not against a park for horses. I'm against $400,000.
be careful, I'm going to start bringing up pickleball, Barry.
End of story. I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I said, be careful, I'm going to start bringing up pickleball courts.
Throughout the city.
But I'm asking us to be intellectually honest here. I think if you went out and asked the residents of this city, would you like to pay $41 less on your residential fire fee, or would you rather cut $400,000 for a rental of keeping horses in stables? I'm going to bet you a double chocolate chip macadamia cookie with sprinkles that the answer would be keep the fire fee where it's at and dump the sand and spurs. Now, I'm not going to
That's just like,
Wait,
do you want
Wait.
the pigs
It's
tied
your
up?
district.
Commissioner-
I understand. It's your district, and if I were in your shoes, I'd be defending it too. I would be. But for the rest of us, let's be a little bit honest, intellectually honest. We all, with the exception of Commissioner Eaton, voted to do away with it, and then a handful of the 113,000 people that live in this city came here and gave us a song and dance, and most of us caved. So let's just be honest with one another. You know, are you really interested in cutting the budget? Yet you want to spend $400,000 to keep 25 privately owned horses housed. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Rental.
That's
It's a
very good.
rental.
Vice Mayor, we're still in a presentation. Vice Mayor, go ahead.
Well, it's two things. One thing in answer to
'Cause
that.
I'd like to cut this off eventually so we can get to the consideration so we can hear from the public also. But go ahead, Vice Mayor.
And I just want to reiterate, Barry, because I agree with you, or Commissioner Moss, because I agree with you. The $400,000 for sand and spurs for private horse would be the equivalent of renting dock space at Alsdorf to private boat owners. It doesn't make sense. I do know, though, that based on just watching like Ocala and things, I have faith that we can actually flip this with the interest and work of the Sand and Spurs community. I think we can actually eventually I think we can turn this around and make a profit, at least cover it, if not make a profit with it. That being said, was part of my thought process when I saw the enthusiasm to do something. But we're gonna have to see. I'm gonna go to their meeting and see what they say and see if that's true. But again, I just want to reiterate, before that vote, I very specifically asked if we were going to be able to hit the same total millage expense of taxes somehow, elsewhere, if we put that forward. So that was and I also wanted to say, I just was looking at things again too. To take away $2 million from the budget is literally 1% of our general fund budget. 1%. And yeah, it seems more like nickel and diming to take a little bit from here, a little bit from there, but then it's not as harsh as taking a whole bunch from one section. And I am passionate about trying to lower our millage, lower our taxes. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna keep going through any door that seems to be an option and bring it to this commission to see if there's something that we can do to bring down taxes. So that's it.
Very good. Further commission discussion on the presentation. Commissioner Perkins.
Yeah, just for clarification, the sand and spurls, there are no changes, so the 400,000 remains there. And just for clarification, the city manager came back and said that he received grant funding to cover other parts of the sand and spurls cost. Is that correct? It's not correct?
No grant
Okay.
funds. No, Mr. Harrison, no. It's
We talked about a grant at that commission meeting. It was not specifically for sand and spurs. And I made the statement that possibly with those grant proceeds, and we could somehow figure out how to save down the line, and then you all wouldn't have to worry about the sand and spurs.
Okay, well, thank you for the correction.
Yes, ma'am.
very good. All right, shall we?
So, Mayor,
Yes, Mr. Harrison.
may I make a proposition to Vice Mayor McGee?
Okay, sure.
If you will bear with us through this process for this budget, after all of the hundreds of hours that this group sitting out here has spent with the lady at the podium and her staff, I will sit with you and we will find 1% out of our budget going into the next fiscal year. And you can be a direct part of finding that.
Would that be preemptive on the fact that the budget will not increase in the next fiscal year?
Well, no.
Because of-
I'm just saying, out of what is approved for the budget for this year, you will sit with me and some staff so that you will have a handle on it. You can make a record of it however you want, in your phone, in your laptop, on a yellow pad, and then when the time is right, going into the process with the rest of the commission, then you can show them what we came up with.
I will definitely sit down for as many hours or days as it takes, but I just want to not cap it at a 1%, because like this year we went up 18%. So,
Oh, I thought you just said you wanted one.
no, that was for this year. If we go up another 18% next year, then 1% is not the same.
Okay, I can see I'm never going to win on this, Mayor, so.
No, I will meet with you and see wherever we can come up with a proposition to cut where we can, to extend, I'd love to see it for the next 10 years, that we are constantly back in the bottom third of the cities in Broward County as far as our millage, as far as cost of living. So, no, I'll meet as many times and as long as it takes, for sure.
So it's more important for us to be in the bottom third? As far
More
as
important for me to
millage
save
is concerned,
taxpayers' dollars.
than what we're providing for the public here now?
It needs to balance, is what I'm concerned at. And I don't want to see us continue to raise our expenditures every year to meet what our profit is on, our return on investment has been on the things we've done. And that's what's happened every year, is it's gone up every year, even though tax revenues have also gone up every year. So I want to make sure that we're getting to a place where tax revenues are going up, but our mills and our expenditures are staying neutral, if not going down.
Okay, well, I can see I haven't done a very good job at educating you on how much more it costs every year to run the city and everything that we're doing, that's in addition to what was there the year before and the year before that.
Yeah, I know that it costs more, and even just cost of living for our employees goes up, and that costs us more. But taking a look at everything, like for instance, we invested in the golf course, and now we're seeing a return on that. We invest in certain things. We're investing in McNabb Park and Botanical Gardens with the idea to have a lease and seeing a return on that investment to cover what was paid. If we see an 18% increase in what we're bringing in and raise our budget by 18%, at some point it's no longer increasing. But our city staff, our cost of everything will continue to increase with inflation and just cost of living increases that happen every year. So I just want to make sure we don't hit a point where suddenly, or not so suddenly, we're not seeing the increase in revenue that covers the increase in our expenditures. And it's more, my biggest concern is this has been a trend the entire time I've been here, is that it's just creeped up year over year, and I want to make sure that we don't continue to do that.
Mr. Harrison, just to be clear, you're not saying that you could have cut 1% from our budget this year, are you?
No,
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was, because it sounded like you were going to sit down and identify 1% in our budget where you could cut.
I asked her to let us go through with all of these agenda items that the staff has prepared for this year's budget. And then after we get into the following year, she can sit down with us and we will figure out what her concerns are.
Okay, you're not suggesting that there is 1% we could cut in this budget?
No.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear and on the record, because it's, of course, if we could cut 1% of this budget, I think we should do it too. I think every commissioner up here would agree. If we can cut 1%, then we should do that. So I just wanted to make sure you weren't proposing that, yeah, after we pass this, you can go back and show where we could have saved 1% in our budget. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Commissioner Fournier?
So at the end of the budget workshop, I made a proposal that we reconvene as a commission and have another workshop going into the budget next year in, call it February. I think this is why it's critical that we do that, so that we can provide the guidance on what we want to see going at the beginning of the budget cycle. So I hope we follow through with that, so we can give you and your staff the direction on what we expect to see as a millage rate and what items, we're willing to compromise on, where we can find opportunities. So I think we need to start a little earlier on that next year with giving our guidance to staff. And then one other housekeeping item, I do think at the July meeting when we discussed Sand and Spurs that the ordinance clearly states it's under Public Works, but there seemed to be a consensus emerging that it should be a park, and it should fall under Parks and Rec, not under Public Works. So I would like to make a motion to ask staff to look at moving Sand and Spurs from Public Works to Parks and Rec, just as a housekeeping item.
Second.
Okay. Well, can we entertain motions like?
Mayor, this is a special meeting. The purpose of the special meeting specifically advertised. What's on the agenda is what we can deal with tonight. If you want to make that motion, that can be done at the next commission meeting, certainly, but not at a special meeting when the purpose of the special meeting is advertised as other matters, and those matters are clearly set on the agenda.
Okay, I will make it at the next meeting. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Segerson Eaton. Any further discussion on the presentation? Okay, thank goodness. Let's move on to considerations. Item 1 is an adoption. Microphone.
Here we go.
Thank you.
Adoption of the tentative millage rate for the city of Pompano Beach for fiscal year 2023 through 2024, reflecting a general fund operating millage of 5.2705, a voted debt service millage series 2018 of 0.3183, and a voted debt service millage series 2021 of 0.2175, for a total millage of 5.8063. The city's proposed aggregate millage rate, general fund operating millage rate 5.2705, and EMS millage rate 0.5000 of 5.7705 represents a 10% increase in property taxes when compared to the aggregate rolled back millage rate of 5.2458. This increase in property taxes is due to the increase in the city's assessed valuation of taxable property on the 2023 tax roll.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded for discussion. Ms. Diamante, do you have anything additional to add?
Mayor, the proposed millage rate for the general fund, it is at 5.2705. This was by consensus from the City Commission during the July budget workshop. This is the millage rate that we're proposing. Other debt service millage rate are adjusted based on the valuation. There is an increase in property taxes that is only due to the increase in the valuation, not related to the millage rate. And that concludes my comments.
Very good. Thank you for that. This is a public hearing. Is there any input from the public? Please come forward to the microphone and just state your name and address for the record. Thank you for being here tonight. Sorry it took so long to get to your part.
Hello, how's everybody doing? I'm a resident of Pompano Beach. I've been here for 6 years, and every year,
Name and
taxes go
address,
up.
sir.
So I'm sure you guys have this
Sir?
meeting every year.
Wait, sir, I think we need your address.
Name and address.
Name and address.
My name is Salvatore Gebbia. My address is 2653 Northeast 15th Street.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I own a small little townhouse with a little dock, and I've been here for 6 years, and every year the taxes go up. And I'm sure you guys have this meeting every year, and you guys can argue. And Mayor, thank you for being grounded in what the residents actually want. And, I mean, I can only speak for myself, and it's lower taxes. As a single with no dependent, I can only control what I want to invest in, right? And like, it's good and all that you guys can come up with the millage rate and increase it every year, but at a certain point, I'm either not going to be able to pay it, or I'm going to choose not to pay it, right? And just go somewhere else. And, you know, you're talking about inflation and that stressing out a lot of people's budgets, which is definitely a concern. And it's a direct, it's directly caused by the federal government printing too much money, right? And then the local government's only response is to raise taxes. So it just doesn't really make sense to me. I'm hoping that you guys actually take the time and consider the 1%, which is a small amount. She's only talking about 1%. You guys are talking about the other 99% that you guys can't seem to find to lower taxes. I mean, it just shows that it's probably better off doing projects in the private sector rather than the government space, because government really doesn't do anything efficient. So that's just what I have to say. It's my time. Vice Mayor, thank you. I really appreciate being grounded with what we actually want.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Next speaker. Just name and address for the record, please.
Hi, Mercedes Marassi, 3451 Northeast 14th Terrace. So I wanted to say a couple of things. I'm only here because I got that paper indicating that, you know, there was going to be an increase, and I wanted to say no. We can't afford it. None of us can afford it. We're being priced out of our homes and priced out of our neighborhoods. That being said, I want to say thank you for advocating for us as residents, for trying to put your foot down and say, no, we don't need any more expenses for these residents. I hear you're talking about, Ms. McGee was talking about this trend that, you know, expenditures keep going up as well. You guys are bringing in more revenue, but you're still spending more money, and that's not doing anything for the residents. She says it's a trend she's seen for the last 5 to 6 years. It's persisting because you guys are allowing it to persist. I see 1, maybe 2 people motivated here to actually look at a budget and cut the spending. The rest of you, it sounds like what you're saying is, oh, it's too late and we can't do it. Let's do it next year. Let's do it next year. No, can't and unwilling are 2 very different things. It's inconvenient. You don't want to reanalyze the budget. You don't want to find the money because, yeah, you're crunched for time, but you could. You could if you really valued the residents and you wanted to make us happy, but that's not the priority here. She also suggested something like, what if we stop paying these third parties with money that we're talking about, you know, trying to cut spending, but yet we're paying people, nonprofit organizations, just handing out money. No one was down with that suggestion. Why? These are nonprofits. They can go raise their own money. My tax dollars don't need to go to these nonprofits. My tax dollars also don't need to go to housing horses. That is my area. I don't agree with that. Let the people who own the horses pay for the horses. Spend our money appropriately. We didn't sign up for this stuff, for this excess spending. 1% can be found and it can be eliminated from the budget if you wanted it to, but you guys aren't interested in that. In addition to that, with my very few seconds left, I will say this has been a bit embarrassing watching that no one knows what's going on, what's been said, what was agreed upon. She was lied to about what she actually voted on in the Sand and Spurs meeting. What is happening? This is disorganization and miscommunication at best, but it's embarrassing to watch. So I expect better. I wish I could see better. So that's all.
Thank you, ma'am. Next speaker. Just name and address for the record, sir.
Michael Solly, 621 Northeast 34th Street. My big annoyance is the millage rate stays the same, but we're being taxed more because property valuations went up. Like, that money's not in my pocket. I'm paying more out, but I'm not getting more in. So, like, where do you guys expect this money to come from? Like, we'll leave. I'm gonna have to leave. It's not a like doable thing to be like, oh, well, the value of your house went up. Okay, my house doesn't put money in my pocket. You want me to get a HELOC to pay for these taxes? It's kind of nuts, like just the concept of it. It just doesn't seem logical to do that. But, I mean, I guess it's already done for this year, right? We'll kick it down to next year, maybe, or 5 years later.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Hi, I'm Dwayne Rivera from 1270 Southeast 7th Avenue. So I moved my parents down here last year from New York. They had their honeymoon back in 1969 here in Pompano, and they wanted to live here. You know, I wish they would have come down sooner, but they were busy watching my two sons grow up, you know, so they put their retirement on hold to spend time with them up north. So now they're here now, and their taxes, the house that they bought, are going from $4,900 a year to almost $15,000, almost $16,000. And I don't know how they're gonna do it. That's my mom and dad back there. My mother's 90. My father just turned 80 this past month. So, I don't know. I think it was a big mistake coming here. You know, Florida, from as long as I've known it, has been here for, you know, people to retire. And my parents, they had their honeymoon here. So when I call my mom, I see her on the cameras. I say, Ma, I see you running. I see you doing things here and there. You know, how could you do all of this? And she's saying, well, 90 is a new 40. And I say, wow, that's a great idea. You know, I felt so good that I made this decision for them to come over here. But now I see it's a big mistake, you know, because now how are they going to afford to live here? You know, my father pushes my mother in the wheelchair to go to CVS, to go to Publix, to go to Walmart, because he can't drive at 80. But everything is close by, so my father pushes her in the wheelchair. I think I made a big mistake for them. They took their life savings from New York and bought a house here where they can retire. And more of our elderly, you all have parents, you're all going to be elderly one day yourselves. And this is going to be all our fate, because as this keeps going up, it's going to go up for everyone. And I like what the vice mayor said about the third parties. They can raise the money on their own, you know? And they're very irresponsible when it comes to rents, because, oh, this is not our money. So they don't mind paying high rents because it's not their money, it's not coming out of their pocket. I think they're very irresponsible, a lot of these nonprofits. Let them raise their own money. Why does it have to come out of taxpayers' money? You know, and that's my 3-minute spiel, you know? I see the smile on their face when they're here, and I try not to bother them with all the headaches that I have to go through. But I had to bring them down here because I've just had enough. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker. Any further speakers? Seeing none, public input closed. Commission discussion. Mr. Moss?
I just think it's interesting in a city of about 113,000 people that 4 people came to talk to us about how high the taxes are and cutting the budget, and not 40 or 400 or 4,000. So I'm not so sure that the residents of Pompano Beach think that they're getting a bad deal in paying their taxes, where I think we offer them very good services, the very best of the EMS and fire and many other services, excellent parks for what they pay. So we just had 4 people express their opinion, and 4 out of 114,000 ain't a lot.
Well, Commissioner Moss, I mean, you're right. It's not a lot, but still, their voice matters also. And to the gentleman whose parents came down, it looks like he already left, but I think that's more of a save our homes issue than simply our tax increase or not. But that's neither here nor there. For the Commission, Vice Mayor?
I just have to say, none of the people who have spoken to me about the same hardships were able to make the meeting today, which doesn't mean they don't exist throughout our city. And all ages, all socioeconomic situations. Again, a lot of it's not even in our control. It's a national situation with inflation and insurance and statewide. It's on a whole lot of different levels, which is why we just try to do what we can do at this level, which is why I will not to pun with Sand and Spurs, but beat the dead horse and just make another motion to at the very least do away with the $300,000 fund that we have set up.
What
You mean,
The $300,000, what's the technical name for it, so I get it right?
Community Partnerships Program.
Community Partnerships Program.
yeah, is it, it's, I'm not sure what the figure is. It's
$300,000.
even 300?
It is, yes.
Okay.
To at least start making a dent, and for now and into the future.
Okay. Motion to cut the 300,000 nonprofit organization giving.
Second.
There's been moved and seconded to cut the 300,000 nonprofit funding. All right, discussion on the motion? All right, no discussion? This is, go ahead, Commissioner Fournier.
Can we get a description of what entities are in that fund again?
Yes, Commissioner. So the agenda item for that particular program is coming up in October, so we can provide you all the backup for this year's fiscal year 24 budget. The 23 budget has already been approved, and we can easily locate that, the backup of the agenda for that item for the current fiscal year. For the following, it is coming up in October, so we will have all the details by that time.
So
One other comment in response to Commissioner Moss. The absence of people here, I don't think is representative or reflects how they feel. I think a lot of them don't want to fight traffic to come here on a Wednesday at 5 o'clock. It's hard to get here. A lot of people are working to pay the taxes or with their kids. So there are a lot of constraints on people's time that make it difficult to get here.
very good. Vice Mayor?
And just to clarify for Commissioner Fournier, and please correct me if I say anything that needs correction. The fund that I'm proposing is a set $300,000 that we put aside, and then we have a third-party rate charities that have pretty much submitted grants to us. So it's a city grant fund. And the next highest city, other than Fort Lauderdale does something similar, the next highest city is down at like 60,000.
I'm familiar, we discussed this at the workshop, so I'm
Yes.
somewhat familiar with the.
Very good. Okay. Commissioner Moss?
With all due respect to Commissioner Fournier, we have had people come here jumping up and down and screaming about lots of things, and if they're not going to come here and jump up and down screaming about the money that comes out of their pocket because there's too much traffic, that's baloney, honey. You know it. Thanks.
Very good. Further commission discussion? Ladies and gentlemen, please. This is a public hearing. Is there any input from the public on this motion? Seeing none, public input closed. Okay. The motion is to cut the $300,000 for the nonprofit funding. Let's go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Fournier,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
No.
Commissioner Perkins,
No.
Commissioner Sigerson-Eaton,
No.
Vice Mayor McGee,
Yes.
Mayor Harden.
No. All right, we're back on the original item. Further discussion on the adoption. Seeing none, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Fournier,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
Yes?
Commissioner Perkins,
No.
Commissioner Sigerson-Eaton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGee,
No.
Mayor Harden.
Yes. That takes us up to item number 2, is
Adoption of the tentative budget for the city of Pompano Beach for fiscal year 2023 through 2024 totaling $400,154,323.
Is there a motion?
Oh, so moved. Sorry.
Second.
Moved and seconded for discussion. Ms. Diamante, anything to add?
Good evening. Again, Henrietta Diamante, Budget Director. This is the adoption of the preliminary budget for all funds. Just one simple note here and clarification that the EMS budget has been excluded from the total amount of $400 million, about $400 million. That the budget, for the EMS budget will be adopted in the following meeting.
Okay. Thank you for that. This is a public hearing. Is there any input from the public on this item? Seeing none, public input closed. Commission discussion. Questions, concerns? This is on the budget. Seeing none, let's go ahead and call the roll.
Commissioner Fournier,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
Yes?
Commissioner Perkins,
No.
Commissioner Sigerson Eaton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGee,
No.
Mayor Harton.
Yes. Takes us up to item 3 is a resolution.
Resolution of the City of Pompano Beach, Florida relating to the provision of fire rescue services, facilities, and programs in the City of Pompano Beach, Florida, confirming the initial assessment resolution, reimposing fire rescue assessments against assessed property located within the City of Pompano Beach for the fiscal year beginning October 1st, 2023, approving the rate of assessment, approving the assessment roll, and providing an effective date.
So moved?
Second.
Moved and second for discussion. Ms. Diamante, once again.
And thank you, Mayor. Arieta Diamante, Budget Director. So this is the final approval of the fire assessment program or fire assessment fees for the city. Initial approval was granted and approved by the City Commission during the last meeting in July, last regular City Commission meeting. As mentioned, the city has hired a consultant government services group to review the fire service data and to ensure proper appropriation of the fees across all categories, residential, commercial, industrial, and warehouse, and institutional as required. So the study resulted in a $34 increase for the residential fees and to make and subsequently the adjustment for all the other fees. The $34 will assess the same amount of revenues as this year. However, to cover more eligible fire operations services at 88%, staff recommended another adjustment to the residential rate up to an $81 per residential rate. All the other rates are adjusted accordingly based on this adjustment. The city will receive in net revenues $28.8 million. The resolution calls for $32.5 million in revenues. That is before the exemptions and discounts. And the revenues assessed by the fire assessment fees are used only for fire operation services, not for the EMS services. That concludes my comments.
Very good. Thank you for that. This is a public hearing. Is there any input from the public on this item? Seeing none, public input closed. Commission discussion, questions, concerns. Vice Mayor.
I just have a question. It kind of dawned on me. With how we had to do the study to figure out what these were, the question is, I know we provide the services for Lauderdale by the Sea and Lighthouse Point, right?
Yes.
Why are their fire assessment fees so much lower? Like, shouldn't they be at least close to ours?
Depends on how they account for their services. Like, it's almost like never an exact science to compare apples to apples. Certain municipalities do cover with our millage rates more, and certain with the fire assessment fees. Some of them don't even have fire assessment fees, the program. So I don't have an exact answer to that.
Could this be something I'd be curious to look into to find out?
It depends on the service calls or residents, how many residents they have, like the size of the municipality. There might be other factors.
Okay. No, I'm fine with moving forward with it right now, but there'd be data that I'd be interested in knowing.
Yeah, the data we have provided to our consultant are real data, so it is what we service, all the service calls. So it is real data that they have analyzed.
Right, and my curiosity is, the idea was that there was more, especially residential calls due to the COVID situation, and that's why the commercial went down. So it sort of makes sense for Lauderdale by the Sea, but with Lighthouse Point being being majority residential, I'm curious if this is some sort of data we can collect before, the budget workshop, just to be able to try and figure out what we're looking at. Thank you.
Very good. Further commission discussion? Questions, concerns? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Fournier,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
Yes?
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Sigerson Eaton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGee,
Yes.
Mayor Harton.
Yes. Takes us up to item 4 is first reading of an ordinance.
An ordinance of the City Commission of the City of Pompano Beach, Florida, amending Chapter 34, City Policy of the City of Pompano Beach Code of Ordinances by amending Section 34.107 Position Classification Plan, by reclassifying certain positions, by creating new positions, by retitling certain positions, and by retitling and reclassifying certain positions, providing for severability, providing an effective date.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second for discussion. Good evening, Mr. Bush.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners, City Manager, and City Attorney. Bobby Bush, the Acting Human Resource Director. This is a housekeeping ordinance for the city ordinance for 34.107, which will add, reclassify, and retitle positions within the classification plan to reflect position changes, which are proposed in the city budget fiscal year 2023-2024. There are 60 classification positions requested in this budget. The Human Resource Department continue to conduct comprehensive classification pay studies to assess pay equity in the existing workforce in order to maintain competitive standards with peer governmental agencies. This proposal also focused on potential growth within the departments and facilitated a viable succession plan. That concludes my comments, subject to any questions that you may have.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. This is a public hearing. Is there any input from the public on this item? Seeing none, public input closed. Commission discussion, questions, concerns? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Fournier,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Sigerson-Eaton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGee,
Yes.
Mayor Harden.
Yes. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
Oh, my.
Next meeting. Call to order the Pompano Beach Commission meeting as EMS Taxing District, Wednesday, September 13th, 2023. Let's see, public hearing, proposed millage and proposed budget for Emergency Medical Services District for fiscal year 2023-2024. Is there any additional presentation, Ms. Diamante? No, very good. Well, we'll move straight on to considerations. Item number 1 is adoption.
Adoption of the tentative millage rate for the Emergency Medical Services District for fiscal year 2023 through 2024 at a millage rate of 0.5000. The proposed millage rate represents an 11.21% increase in property taxes when compared to the rolled back millage rate of 0.4496. This increase in property taxes is due to the increase in the city's assessed valuation of taxable property on the 2023 tax roll.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second for discussion. Ms. Diamante.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Arieta Diamante, Budget Director. So this is the tentative adoption of the EMS millage rate of 0.5000. This is a cap millage rate for the EMS district. The increase in property taxes over the rollback millage rate of 0.4496 of 11.21%. It's only due to the increase in the valuation. And that concludes my comments.
Very good, thank you for that. This is a public hearing. Is there any input from the public on this item? Seeing none, public input closed. Commission discussion, questions, concerns? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Fournier,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Sigerson-Eaton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGee,
Yes.
Mayor Harden.
Yes. Item number 2 is adoption.
Adoption of the tentative budget for the Emergency Medical Services District. I'm sorry, let me turn my mic back on. Adoption of the tentative budget for the Emergency Medical Services District for fiscal year 2023 through 2024, totaling $25,523,255.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and second. Once again, Ms. Diamante.
Thank you. No further comments, Mayor.
Very good, thank you for that. This is a public hearing. Is there any input from the public on this item? Seeing none, public input closed. Commission discussion, questions, concerns? Seeing none, let's call the roll.
Commissioner Fournier,
Yes.
Commissioner Moss,
Yes.
Commissioner Perkins,
Yes.
Commissioner Sigerson-Eaton,
Yes.
Vice Mayor McGee,
Yes.
Mayor Harden.
Yes, this meeting is now adjourned.
Yes, sir.